Hey, welcome everyone, I'm Ichikoku and today we'll be looking at the second, well, technically, officially, first episode of this new Modding of Isaac series. Episode 0 was just basic Lua and all that. Today we'll be looking at the basic Isaac modding. Well, we'll not be doing exactly a basic Isaac modding, we will not be looking at smells or stuff. I will just be covering like the basics, like Lua basics of Isaac modding, if I'm making myself clear. So we'll be reviewing callback syntax, how to use callbacks, how to set up stuff like the player, and stuff to avoid in general. This should be a shorter tutorial than the last time. It's not too much to cover, and I will explain just a little bit how the other callbacks work and all that. But yeah, first off, how to write a callback. So one of the first things you wanna do. Okay, so yes, I was saying one of the main things you wanna learn when working on Minecraft mods is how to write callbacks. So if you look at other mods, the first thing you will notice is how they every single thing they do is written inside of a callback. Callbacks. What are callbacks? Well, basically, what callbacks are basically a function, not a function, a setup to call functions on specific places where the game should update. For example, MC NPC update is a callback used to, well, update enemies or NPCs. If you try to update NPCs on, say, use item, it will not work because use item only gets called when you use an item, hence the term callback, because it gets called back, it calls back your function when this specific action occurs. So what you want to do is learn how to write callbacks. The usual thing you will see in older tutorials and even newer mods is this setup. Basically what you do is register a function with your mod name and write like an update like this, and then you write the callback separately to the function mod add callback, mod callbacks, repost update, and then with a dot instead of a colon. This is very important. Use a colon here and here. Here you use a dot. What you want to do is write your function name without this, just your function name, like this. Simple, really. This is what is usually done. Now in recent months, years even, this method was discovered. What you do is you spare yourself from registering the function in the first place. You don't need to register the function or a name. The name is really important because it can cause issues if other mods have this as a global function. So with this setup, you can call mod add callback, mod callbacks, and see post update function, and this works as well. And you spare yourself, I didn't write function right. You spare yourself from trying to figure out a name. Now there's a crucial thing to understand here. As you can see here, this is passing player, and here it's also passing player, but it has this thing right here. Now if you get rid of these things, the mod will error, and that is because the function right here is not passing anything. Now I think I need to explain. Functions in Lua basically work like this. Imagine you have I've been using this a lot. Player get max hearts. Now what this does is basically gets the player's hearts, but what it's not explained is that this function actually takes the player as an argument, but while using the column, the player is already passed an argument. So this really is just an entry, table entry inside of the player class. What this function really does is player dot get max hearts player. I can demonstrate here. So for example, Lua print Isaac get player 0 get max hearts 6 to have 6 health points. Now if I do the same, but instead of this I write get max hearts, it will error because it was expecting player. But if I go out of my way again and I write get player 0, it outputs. So as you can see, this function is really just an entry in the player class, but using the colon passes the player as an argument. So this here is the same as this, except passive. This is why you will see a lot the setup like game get frame count is the same as game dot get frame count game. I can demonstrate again, but I won't because I already proved my point. The only single class in the game that doesn't follow this criteria of colon because it doesn't take itself as an argument is the Isaac class. So this class, every single entry of this class uses a dot. So if I do Isaac get frame count, it doesn't take Isaac as an argument. If you do this, it will error. It doesn't like taking arguments. It doesn't like taking itself an argument. I can demonstrate again here. So if I do this, Isaac dot get frame count. Okay, it's a number. It's obviously increasing because I don't remember any other methods. But if I this, yeah. Well, that's unexpected. Huh. Well, no, I'm dumb. This is because this function doesn't take any arguments, so I'm pretty sure if I do this, it will work as well. Yeah, never mind. This is a really bad example because this doesn't take any arguments. This function doesn't take arguments in general. But let's say I need to think of a Isaac get player. If I do print Isaac dot get player 0 dot help. Oh, it's hit points. Let's just do damage. Okay, 3.5. So if I wanna do this, if I go like Isaac 0 damage, that's the thing. So it's the same if I do Isaac get player 0 damage. It's calling itself as the first entry, as the first argument, and it will not work because it doesn't take itself as an argument. That's what I want to get here. The Isaac class is the only one that doesn't follow that criteria. Every single other class like player, game, room, level, entity in general, every single class in the game takes that criteria into consideration except for Isaac. Isaac is the only one that doesn't take itself as an argument. So if you do like NPC, but it's a function that NPCs have, fire projectile and arguments. It's the same as NPC dot fire projectiles NPC arguments. Hopefully it's clear by now. Just make sure you know how to differentiate between the colon and the dot. Usually I said you want to do this because it's shorter, and that's how most mods are written. But yeah, just make sure to how you write your functions, because if you write here this, it will error because yeah, you are not passing mod as the first argument. So you need to be you need to be aware of that. Same here. Here what this is doing is this. This is what this line here is doing. So that's why here you just skip. You can write it here mod, but it's really not useful unless you use the mod variable here, which is also not useful because you're already calling here. Whatever. You will almost never use this here unless you strictly use like a mod table here, not that variable. But even then, I'm pretty sure that this argument here passes on to here, and you can use a variable already. So that's mainly why this space is right here. If you do this, it will error. You need to make sure, you need to be aware of that. But anyway, for me, this setup is more comfortable because, as I said earlier, you don't need to register a function name, so you can spare yourself from that. Of course, you want to like name the function above, but you can just say like, oh, this is player update. You don't need like a fancy name to prevent incompatibilities. So that's what I always go with this. You can see right here. Now that's for the callback syntax, and more than callbacks, just method and function syntax in general in Lua. Why did I derail so much? Because you will see this a lot. Nowadays this is starting to be more common, especially because bigger modders are starting to use it, and people who want to start modding look at those mods and grab this to mod themselves. So yeah, you need to, even if you don't use it, even if you rather this, you at least need to know how this understands for when you try to read more mods to gather more information. And in general, because it will happen to you, even if you're super experienced, it's happened to me even recently, you will eventually just do this on accident or on purpose and get an error and don't know why. So you need to analyze what you're doing when calling functions. I will explain this. Using a dot is just an entry on the table and calls itself and doesn't call itself. When you use colon, it calls itself in the end of the table, so you don't need this here. If you use that, it will error. You need to delete that. Yeah. Mod.function. Mod is the same as mod colon function. That's what I want to get into. That's what I want to let you know. And hopefully that is explained. Hopefully you understood what I meant, and if you did, I guess we will go to how to callback, how to use these callbacks properly, how do they work, what do they do. Now, here I explained 3 different types of callbacks that are in the game. The callbacks with no arguments. Now here, for example, this will also take this as an argument, but since it never uses it, you can avoid doing this. You can just leave it empty, don't write anything. And here you can basically write like this, it doesn't matter. Hell, you can even write it like this if you want to, it's the same. But yeah, no arguments. These functions are usually like post update, post render. They don't take any arguments, they just work every single update of the game or under specific circumstances. For example, post update, post render. There are a few others like post new room, post new level, and a few others that take no arguments. Single argumented callbacks. These are like update and render callbacks, like NPC update, post player init, for example, to init callbacks, update callbacks, collision callbacks. You can notice which functions take arguments by just bring the documentation or the enumerations. They state what they take here. This takes an NPC, and for example, post update doesn't take anything. It's kind of straightforward. So the difference is in single argument functions, what you can do is state what you want to call. So for example, here, if I didn't have this, it would call for every single update for every single entity in the room. Well, NPC, not entity. But if you state this, it will only ever get called on the entity gaper. So Here, allow me to demonstrate. Um, Let me just use a debug string to prove my point. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so here, did I... Yeah, it's still on Gapers, so... Here it works like every frame, but for only Gapers. Now say I spawn dips. And this. Now this only gets called for the Gaper. But you can see right here the index is always the same. Now imagine I get rid of this line entirely. If I get rid of that, then this will start proccing for every single entity in the room. You can see right here, there's 38, 39, and 40. It goes called every frame. So that's my point. What you want to do almost always is specify an entity type. So your function only gets called on that specific entity. Otherwise, it's going to be laggy, and you don't want your mouth to be laggy. The only reason why you wouldn't specify an entity here is if you really want to call an update on every entity in the room every single frame. Now, if you wanna call like if you wanna call updates, on entities, but not every single frame, there are ways to circumvent this. You can call a GetRoomEntities or find by type or find by radius inside of another update callback without using these. This is like your last resort. Not specifying an entity here. This is your last resort for when you want to update entities every single frame for every single entity. But more often than ever, you won't need that. You will only need like this. Specify an entity, you're fine, good to go. Bear in mind, you can only specify an entity type. You cannot specify entity variants or subtypes. You can only specify entity types. So here, there's multiple argumented functions. Now these functions of course they take more than one argument, but sometimes they still only take one but pass several. This, for example, was a bad example. This passes like entity, damage amount, damage flags, damage source, and damage countdown, but it only takes the entity player. A better example would be this one. Now this... No, wait, this also takes only one argument, which is a cache flag. Okay, there are very few functions that take more than one argument. But my point is, if you see functions like this that pass like 5, my bet will be read the documentation, because even if you like deduce these will take like, yeah, I only want this to pass if my damage amount is of 2, and if my flag is like damage explosion, and if my source is like a caper and that sort of stuff. No, you need to read through the documentation to know what you can pass into the function, because there are very few that take more than one. Most only take a single argument more often than ever. Even collision callbacks only take one argument. Yeah, there's very few that take more than one. It's usually 0 or 1. For example, like up here, yeah, this takes no argument. Even though it possesses a player, you do not need to specify like here entity type entity player. if you do this, it will literally do nothing because it doesn't take more than this argument. So yeah, when working with callbacks you do not know, my best bet will be to always get in this side. Did I write this? No, yes, it's fine. You want to do is go to this doc specifically. You do not want to read through the official documentation inside the Reaper folder because that documentation sucks ass. Forgive me for the words. Yeah, this one was made by the community itself, and it's way more complete and understandable than the official documentation. So that's why I say just read through that. It has very detailed information on the callbacks. But anyway, that's basically the rundown on how callbacks work and how to use them. For single argument, for no arguments, and multiple arguments. My advice is, when you're working with a callback you do not know, read through the documentation. Just read. I won't open my browser because it has like stuff. You can see right here, it's not clear. I will censor it anyway. But yeah, I won't open. Well, whatever. Yeah, I can. Here, this is documentation. It's way more complete. You can check a key. You can check up. I don't have to speak. You can check here. Callbacks, and it's super complete. Let's wait until it loads. Here, you can see it tells you what the arguments are and what you can place, and it also explains to you how to actually register it, so it's pretty useful. Now, all that said, that's basically everything in regards to callbacks. Now, if you want to take a break, that's fine. It's been 20 minutes. I don't expect you to be here standing like 20 minutes just to understand the basics of modding. If you want to take a break, it's fine. You can pause the video, go whatever, do whatever you want, come back, it's fine. But I will be continuing to the next step. Player setup. Now, a common mistake I see a lot of people do is take functions like post player update that already pass a player's argument and go here and still register player. Now this is going to cause issues because this function already updates on co-op players. So if you call this function, say the co-op baby, and then register player 0, it will override this argument and start running code for player 0 twice. And you do not want that ever, because let's say you have a timer. You have a timer of 30 frames. Now if you call that timer with local players, with player 0 in player update, what you will do is reduce that timer to half. Instead of 30 frames, you will run like at 15 frames. You will basically run your function at twice the speed if you register player here and call this function on a co-op baby. It will get called regardless of what you want, because that's how the game works. This function gets called for every player in the game, but as I said, if you register this as player and override this, you will be doing code on the player 0 while working on player 1, and you don't want that. So now that I've explained that, hopefully you could understand. Let's go in here. So, how to register players. Okay, here, take this with a grain of salt, because this, you can do whatever you want. If you want true up compatibility, you wanna use this setup around here. If you're just doing an item or a character or something, and you specifically do not want to have true up to co-op compatibility, that's fine. You do you. You don't need to add compatibility with true co-op. I always do it because just in case someone uses my item or whatever. For characters it's probably not worth it, but for items you don't lose anything with doing true co-op. Now, as I said, you can do this. It's fine to do this right here if you do not want true cop compatibility. If what you want to do is have your mod be compatible with the true cop mod, you need to do this. This will only proc on player 0. So if you want to get every single player, you need to do this loop. Right here it checks, it registers the p variable as 0 because it starts at player 0, and get non-players -1 because all this will get like above 1. If there's one player, will return 1, but you do not want to run this on 0 on 1 of course. So -1 this basically returns 0 if this is, but if there's 2 players it will return 1, and then you go what, like 0 and 1. Like, I don't know if I'm explaining. Since it's player 0, not player 1. The player right here that you're seeing, Isaac right here, is player 0, not player 1. Player 1 would be the true cop baby. This is player 1. How do I like that? Okay, that's player 1, this is player 0. So yeah, this basically ensures that this returns 0 if there's only one player, returns 1 if there's 2 players, and so back and so forth, to a max of like 3 or 4 players. And then you just register players like this, like up here, but instead of 0 you use the variable you register here as p, and then you execute your code right here like you would right here, except this time it will run for every specific player instead of just player 0. Now for augmented functions, as I said earlier, what you want to do is to, because some people don't even do it like I said up here. Some people just don't even notice. They use player update and don't even notice that it gives player as an argument, because they are used to seeing like post update and stuff, so they skip this argument. They completely skip it and then write this. Now it's usually easy to know what functions take arguments just by reading the name. For example, post update, it doesn't say anything, it just update, so it's straightforward to think it doesn't take any arguments. But for example, MC NPC update, if you read this, you can assume is used to update NPCs, so you can also assume it passes an NPC as an argument or as a value. Same with post player init, for example. Since it's post player init, you would assume it will only get called on the player and then pass the player as an argument. And that's true, that's how it works. So it's usually straightforward, realizing how this works. But yeah, even if you forget, as I said, just read the documentation when you have any questions. But avoid doing this at all costs. I already explained why. Because if you run this on player 1 or player 2 or player 3 and override the player with player 0, you will run this twice, thrice, or 4 times as fast and don't even realize it. I can even demonstrate right here. If I have like so here, you can see it on the updates like one, it's like 29, 20. Wait, did I do it on post render? Oh, I'm dumb. Okay, yeah. Now this, I'm sorry, I didn't even notice. Here it says 4 and 2 because it's iterating through each player. But if you override player like this, only player 0, now it will be 4 4 4 4, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, you're overriding the player, and what you're doing is running this twice per frame instead of just once per player. So hopefully, I know it took a long while to explain that, but it's really important, because if you have a timer, I'm not gonna do a timer because that's gonna take a while, but if you have a timer that's like 30 frames long and you override the player like I did here, the timer will then turn 15 frames long because you're running it twice per frame, overriding the second player with the first one. But if you just do it like this, you're fine. It will run the timer as you want it to do. No issues. So please make sure to know the function and callback that you're working with before actually working with it. If you're using post player update, post player init, post player render, or something like that, you need to know that it will always pass a player as an argument, just to avoid these sort of setups, because this is something I see a lot of newcomers do all the time. And I mean, I guess I get why, because they are used to seeing like post update and they just see post player update and assume the same. It's just messy. Just you need to know, yeah, what functions passes arguments and whatnot. Now here is just another niche thing. If you want true co-op compatibility, this is also a thing. If you don't want it, you can do whatever you want, honestly. This is just for true co-op. Here, if you pass the player's argument in entity take damage, what you will be inclined to do is registering the player as Isaac at player 0. That's fine. As I said, it doesn't matter if you are not aiming to do true co-op. But if you want to do true co-op, you need to do is take the entity and then call 2-player on it. And I think this is also more efficient overall, calling 2-player instead of registering player itself. But as I said, just do what you're more comfortable with. This is only if you want to do true co-op. Even if it might be more efficient, if you're comfortable with this, not with this, roll with it. Unless you are doing like 700 callbacks like this, then yeah, you might want to switch to a more efficient alternative. But if you're just doing like a single item with a single callback like this, do whatever you want. Just bear in mind, this is for true co-op. Now, there's another thing I didn't explain here. I will have to write this on the code. I will not make it, but yeah, I will. Get room entities. Now, this is a thing I see a lot of people do. Mainly because Lightbringer did it, and I don't blame him. I don't even know if find by type or find in radius was a thing back then. But yeah, I see a lot of code like local ents equals Isaac get room entities. Then for entity pairs, let's do. Oh well, let's just skip this. Don't need that, do we? Now this isn't necessarily wrong, but there are way better ways to do it. Mainly because when I see this, it's like people do stuff like this. If ent.type equal entity type entity gaper, then this stuff. This is utterly horrifying in terms of code, because GetRoomEntities is a super taxi function. It takes a lot of memory getting every single entity in their room. Say we have, well, because you can see like these are entities, the games are entities, these are entities, every single thing like effects, familiars, tiers, projectiles, enemies are entities. GetRoomEntities, what it does is get every single one of them, and that's not good if you wanna get a specific entity. Now, I'm not saying you should never use this, but if you wanna use it, it's under very, very specific circumstances. You don't want to use it for a single enemy, or 2 enemies, or 3 enemies, or the entire enemy class. You want to use this if and only you wanna get every single entity in the room. If you don't want to do that, do not use GetRoomEntities. I will go over the 2 other ones. There's the best one for this scenario, Isaac dot find by type. Now what this does is, as you can imagine, you take this, basically put it inside the function. What entity do you want to find? Well, I want to find gapers, so I type dot entity gaper. What variant do you want to get? Well, what variants gaper are there? Found gaper. Okay, let's say I only want normal gapers, so one, and every subtype in the game. So what this will do is only iterate through normal gapers with a variant of 1. If you want morning gapers, you change this variant to 2. If you want rounding gapers, change to 0. And the best thing is, if you don't want to differentiate between any gapers, you want to get them all, you can put -1. This will get every single variant of gaper there is, while only iterating through frowning gapers. But frowning gapers, sorry, by the ID of 10, the ID of a gaper. Yeah, the only issue is you cannot, well, not an issue, because if you wanted to do this, you will just choose GetRoomEntities. But yeah, you can use this for anything. You can use it for entity projectile, you can use it for entity bony, you can use it for entity player. Yeah, that's valid too. You can do that if you want to. You can use this for whatever you want. Now the other setup I want to comment on is Isaac.finding radius. So what it does, as you can imagine, is find entities in a radius, but that's not the matter. The matter here is you can basically cover an entire room with this function. So as a room is like 640 pixels wide, so if you want to get both rooms, you want to do like 1280, something like that. What I use is 1500. What you want to do is set a position. Here I already have the player, so I can use like player.position and then 1500. There's better ways to do it. Like you can really cut this in half. If you do this and get like room position, but that will probably be less efficient because you have to call room and whatever. So this will take the player as the center of the radius. Here 1500 is like the extension. We'll send like 1500 pixels to there, 1500 pixels. I don't know if it's recording my thing. Basically it will get 1500. It will get 1500 here, 1500 up here, down here, and over there. That's how it works. That's the radius. It basically guarantees you will cover the entire room. Now, the interesting thing is, you can set an entity partition. In this case, you can read the entity partitions over here. The familiar, bullet, tier, enemy, pickup, player, and effect. Now what I usually use this for is enemies. This is like GetRoomEntities, when instead of getting every single entity in the room, it gets only enemies. So yeah, this is valid too when you do this. But well, not this. If you wanna do this, just use find by type. Or if you wanna do this, then this is valid because, well, I'm not sure if it's more efficient than running 2 of these loops. But if it's not, then this is valid. Even if it's not more efficient than this is still valid. You can do this if you want. Getting every single enemy in the room is not as inefficient as getting every single enemy plus tier, plus player, plus familiar, plus effect in the room. So this is valid. You can do this if you want. But yeah, if you want to get a single entity, please just use find by type. If you want to get specific classes, you can do this. Now the good thing about finding radius is entity partition is a flag. As you can see here by these things right here, it's a flag. So with flags you can stack them up. So if you do this entity partition dot bullet, you will get every single enemy plus every single projectile in the room. Now let's say you wanna get every single thing except effects. You wanna get players, you wanna get familiars, you wanna get tiers. And pickups. This is valid. It will get every single entity in the room except effects, and that is still more efficient and less memory consuming than using GetRoomEntities. Now if you did plus effect right here, then that will probably less efficient than GetRoomEntities, but you won't usually be using that many flags. You will probably just be using a single one or two at max. You can use however many you want. I'm just saying you will usually be using one or two. So yeah, only use GetRoomEntities if you need to get every single entity in the room. You wanna get single one, use find by type. If you wanna get every single entity of a specific type, like enemies or pickups, or well, not pickups, like enemies or effects. No, if you're gonna get every single entity, every single enemy, that's really the only use for this, because if you wanna get every single pickup, guess what? You can use find by type and change this to entity pickup. If you wanna get tiers, you change this to tier, projectile, player, familiar. So yeah, don't use finding radius for players, pickups, tiers, bullets, familiars, or effects. Just use it for enemies, or if you wanna get like, maybe you wanna get tier plus bullet. This is fine. This is worth not using like find by type. That's okay. If you wanna just get this, yeah, just use find by type. I think this is very important because if you watch like a light bringer tutorial after this, and see him using finding GetRoomEntities for like, what he does in his video is GetRoomEntities and then born enemies. What he does is like, if entity is vulnerable enemy, then just to get NPCs, don't do this, just do this. You will need to do this like still, because there are some entities are like stonies, or some entities are just not vulnerable. So you still want to do this, but this spares you from getting pickups, player, tiers, projectiles, and mostly effects. Though projectiles and tiers are also taxi, don't get me wrong, but the effects are the most taxi thing if you wanna use GetRoomEntities. So hopefully that is explained. Hopefully, basically TLDR, never use GetRoomEntities only if you want to get every single entity in the room. If you want to get a single type of entity, use find by type, and you can use this to specify a specific variant. Like say you wanna get like only the Demon Baby to work with, you can do this, and this will only run on Demon Baby. That's the thing. Use find by type for specific types or variants of a class. If you wanna get every single entity, every single enemy, sorry, or a combination of two classes, use finding radius with 1500. That's my advice. Never use GetRoomEntities. These two are way better alternatives than GetRoomEntities. Now that is explained, I think I took a long while, but this makes me so mad whenever I see someone using GetRoomEntities. And I know why. I know it's because Lightbringer used GetRoomEntities in his tutorial. And I'm not sure if find by type or finding radius were a thing back then. I respect it if they weren't, but as I said, his tutorials are outdated. Not to say they are not useful, you can still watch them and gather a lot of useful information. But bear in mind, every single time he uses GetRoomEntities, you can just use find by type or finding radius and spare yourself from a lot of useless memory waste. So that's my point. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch Lightbringer tutorials. You probably should. They're super useful, especially for beginners. But yeah, take this into consideration. GetRoomEntities is a no-no. Never use that function unless yada yada yada, every enemy, whatever. I already explained that like 1,000 times, and I feel like I still need to explain it because I know that people will still use it unnecessarily. So I need to make this clear. These two are way better alternatives than GetRoomEntities. They are way better alternatives than GetRoomEntities in basically every single scenario, except when you wanna get like all partitions. So yeah, I'll go to the next topic. I know this was like a really long topic, so if you wanna pause, I'm pretty almost done with the tutorial. So if you wanna take a break or not, that's on you. You can do it. I will take some water. You can take a break while I take some water, pause the video, whatever. So before we go to what to avoid, I just want to make it known. My hiding tutorials or enemy tutorials or whatever I decide to do in the future will also be probably as long as this. Even if I have like already explained, I know Lightbringer also was thorough and he's probably better at explaining than me. I'm not that good at explaining, but I still want to go as thoroughly as possible, as thoroughly as possible on my tutorials just to get the point loud and clear and make it easier to understand. The less you have to go to the comments or to the exact Discord to ask for help after watching my tutorials, the best. Even if that requires more time of me to explain something and more time of you to sit through and watch and learn and read. Because what I want you to do is learn from these tutorials. I don't want you to just copy my code and paste it and call it a day, and then go to the Isaac Discord and I ask for help when it doesn't work like the way you want it to. I want you to read through this, listen to what I have to say, learn what it does and how to use it. I want you to write your own code. Like, you can use my code for reference, that's okay, but what I want you is better write your own code on the run, like, and do what you want to do, not copy my code. Because if you copy, you're not going to learn. If you listen and read and write on your own and practice, you are going to learn way better than copying, pasting and asking for help. And that's basically my point. So my future tutorials, because I will make more, will also be long as this. Maybe not as this, these are introductions. These are way longer than they need to be. Or not way longer than what other tutorials will need to be, because they are an introduction to the basically Isaac modding and Lua basics. But yeah, be prepared if you see like my item tutorial be like 40 minutes long. It's probably going to happen because I need to go over a lot of stuff, pros and cons, how to work with them, what not to do. Basically what Lightbringer did was like what to do. What I want to explain, if you can notice, I try to explain a lot what not to do. Because yeah, I can explain what to do and you can use it and then do dumb stuff on accident, like I did, like we all did at some point, because it was not explained what you shouldn't do. So yeah, that's why I make a lot of emphasis on what not to do. Yeah, hopefully the point is clear. My next tutorials will be long. Be prepared if you want to follow my series. If you are new to modding, I'm honestly I I wish. Sorry, I forgot the word. I wish this helps you a lot because yeah, as I said, the early tutorials are outdated and we need something new for now and expand upon them. And that's my goal. Now, MCX update versus MCX render. Now the thing is, this game runs at 60 FPS. However, the logic of the game runs at 30 frames per second, while the game still runs at 60. So basically what update does is it runs once per logic frame and render runs once per frame. So here if I do a quick thing, sorry, this will take a little while. Like this. Here you will notice it will post like 1 bop and then 2 beeps, then 1 bop, then 2 beeps if I run it. Zip. It's bop, beep, beep, bop, beep, beep, and like that. Well, while it's pause, that's another difference. Update only runs while the game is updating. Render runs even if you pause the game. So right now the game is paused. It's only beep 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 beep. If I unpause, it starts to play the pop string. If I pause again, it's only beep. So that's the thing. That's the main difference. Post update runs once. It runs at 30 FPS, and only when the game is updating. Post render plays plays at 60 FPS and every single frame, not only when the game is updating. So you need to take that into consideration. If you want to use render for something like, say, that's another thing, render, as you can imagine from the name, is used to render sprites on screen. So if you try to render a sprite on update, it will jitter. It will like render one frame, the next one don't, then it will flicker a lot between visible and not visible because it's rendering like once every 2 frames at 60 FPS. So for rendering sprites you need to use post render. Now the thing is, maybe you want to render a sprite and not render it while the game is paused. But as I said, render runs while the game is paused. So you should wanna use like game. If not, and this was updation. By the way, I'm using game a lot here, but it's because it's raised up here as a variable. This is a real variable, a real class. I just raised it here to make it easier. You need to do this as well if you want to use this variable. Probably a little late to explain, but yeah. So that's mainly the thing before render and update. I deleted the other point on accident. I think. Okay, there's a few issues with the MC init callbacks. Now these are good. Imagine you want to make an item that, I don't know, maybe gives the player a damage up or something when an entity spawns. So you want to use init. Or say you want to register a variable when an entity spawns that's valid. So say what am I doing? Okay, sorry. Like this. So say you wanna like register a variable, here get data.pound equal true. That's fine, it works for this, but let's say you want to get an attribute from this thing. Now let's go to here. Sorry, entity here. Now let's say you want to get I don't know, the base damage. Okay, let's do this. I'm pretty sure it will not work. Oh right, okay, I guess this is tied to the player itself. Let's say height. No, that's also tied to the player. Well, I think tier is a bad example. For example, entity things. So most usually what you want to do in some cases is use a parent. View parent type. This will return nil because the tier is not initialized yet. So no, nil. Yeah, that's basically what it does. It'll give an error because parent doesn't exist. Right. The only things you have on init when you use the callback is stuff defined on the XML, like friction or type variant. If you try to get a position to, like just this, it will return 0 instead of its actual position. Yeah, 0. Because it's initialized with this vector, and then on the same frame it spawns, it redirects it. I'm sure you're probably not understanding this, but what you want to know is only stuff that is defined in the XML, like friction, type, variant, subtype, damage, which is based off the player, mass, hit points, all that. You will only be able to access that on init. Any other attribute like position, velocity, parent, child, or that will not be accessible, so you need to be aware of that. Now that that's out of the way, I should get... oh, well, I already explained this up here. This. There's another callback you should avoid that I will just point out quickly. Input action. Input action is a weird callback. It's useful if you want to hijack controllers. Sorry. But it has a major flaw. Basically, it runs 1 per button action, per key per input hook. Now, just let's see, there's 28 entries here. Whatever many this is, let's say 50 and 3. So basically runs 28 times 50, 28 times 50 times 3 times per frame. Now I'm probably getting this wrong. It's probably it's probably not like this. Let me check here. I'm probably making up stuff. It is inefficient, but I doubt it's 4200 times. Okay, yeah, no. Oh. What? Okay, sorry. It gets called once per player, per input hook, per button action. But it's not as inefficient as I thought. It's still 28 button actions, so at the very least it's 84 times per frame. Sorry I scared you before. I'm a moron. 84 times per frame at the very least. Now you have 2 players, double it. You have 3 players, triple it is super inefficient. For instance, render is just 2 times per frame. Compare that to 84 times per frame. It's not good to have this callback at all. It's a really inefficient callback that you should avoid at almost all costs unless you're specifically aiming to overwrite inputs or do inputs manually. Yeah, do not use input callback unless you are using for specifically overriding or inputting inputs. You just want to get like, oh yeah, I want to proc this whenever I press a key. Well, guess what? There's input get is action press and input that is action trigger. You can use this instead of the input callback on update or render or whatever you want, as long as you're not using the input callback. Now there's a few broken callbacks. I will go through them, the ones I remember. There's some I forgot about. It's better to go over here. Now, mainly the collision callbacks. Collision callbacks can only be, let me see if I find one. Okay, here. This callback can only be used once across all mods. Any collision callback, either pre-pickup collision, pre-player collision, pre-entity collision, those can only be called once for all mods. So yeah, that's a big deal. There's a few others. This that are broken. There's pre-NPC update. Let me here. This also can only be accessed once by all mods. Only one mod can use this. Pre-spawn clean award 2, and then there's the classic MC level generator. Doesn't work at all. Now there's a workaround. If you wanna use collision callbacks or that, I use collision callbacks here for example. It's fine, but you absolutely most definitely require to use a mod compatibility pack. You need this. You need to have this mod installed, and you need to require this mod with yours. This basically fixes whatever you want, whatever your issue is. I don't even know if for example, for Blood and Magic, I think, yeah, I have this myself in here. I just copied what I needed and pasted it here. So you don't need to have this to play my mod. But if you don't have that thing in your mod, you need to require mod compatibility hack. It's a must, because otherwise it's gonna error with other mods, and you don't want that. You want it to be compatible with as many mods as possible. But yeah, every collision callback and the others I explained. Now this tutorial ended up being even longer than the basic Lua introduction, and that's surprising honestly. I think that's all of the basic Isaac stuff I need to explain. There's classes, but I'm not going through every single one of them. Oh, I pressed the wrong. Yeah, there's a lot of classes and whatnot. Here's the most important, and I will not go over that. I will go over that whenever I get to that tutorial, but right now it's the introduction to modding. We went over callback syntaxes, how to write callbacks. We went over how to use callbacks. We went over how to use callbacks, and we went over how to register players and how to not register players. We also went over GetRoomEntities. This is very important. Please do not use GetRoomEntities or I will scream at you No matter how old you are, no matter your gender, I will scream at you with the same intensity if you use GetRoomEntities. Please do not use GetRoomEntities. For my sake, and for your computer's sake, and for Tim's potato computer's sake, do not use GetRoomEntities ever. And well, we went over some other stuff too, and I think that's it for this tutorial. It's over an hour long, that's impressive. But I wanted to explain this as best as I could. I think I did a good job explaining every single thing. Even I know I can rush. I know I sound like I'm rushing. That's because, as I said, I'm not good at explaining stuff. So I just talk a lot. I talk a lot and try to explain everything super fast instead of talking slow and taking my time talking and all that. Because if I had taken my time, spoken slowly and smoothly and whatever, I would have taken like 2 hours or more. So sorry. Forgive me for being that fast. As I say a lot, you have no ties to the video or anything. You don't have to follow through without pausing or anything. If you get stuck, if you don't understand something, you can absolutely go back and rewatch. You can absolutely ask for help in the comments. It's not like an exam or anything. Just take your time, ask for help if you need to. It's not illegal to ask for help. It's not illegal to rewatch, to rewind. Just learn however you can learn, but as long as you want to and you're learning, that's what matters in the end. Just yeah, that's it. As I said earlier, I will take long with tutorials in general. That's gonna be my style. I'm sorry if you don't like it, if you don't enjoy watching through an hour of tutorial. I know some of you may want to start modding, but you don't have the time to sit through a long tutorial. But bear in mind, you are going to spend a lot of time modding yourself. You're not going to do like complex items. You're not going to do this mod, which is not even finished by the way, in like 2 hours. You're gonna take time. You need to be patient when modding, and I think these tutorials are a good way to make you learn that, because if you don't have the patience to sit through a long tutorial like this, you will not have the patience to sit through weeks of work or days or whatever to make a big mod. You need to learn to be patient, and hopefully you learn that through my tutorials if you don't already, because I know it's tiring and it's boring to watch a long tutorial or a long video in general for like an hour straight. But here's the thing, you don't need to watch for an hour straight. I say that a lot over my tutorials. You can take a break if you want. You don't need to follow through the entire tutorial at once. It's not bad, it's not wrong, it's not illegal to take a break. Maybe you get overwhelmed because this looks like short, but it's a lot of content. It's 5 big topics. I explain them in a lot of detail each. So it's not short, to say the least. It's a lot of content to understand. So if you really need to take a break to process what we're doing here, you can absolutely can. You're not tied to the tutorial. You're not tied to watching the entire thing and doing it by yourself while watching or anything. You can just take your time, grab a snack, watch, but you need to pay attention. You don't need to be writing code as we're going through the tutorial or anything. You can watch yourself, just understand what's going on, and then when you want or have the chance, you can revisit or start coding by your own. But yeah, you don't need to sit tight and watch the entire thing, because I know I would not watch an hour or 15 minutes of the tutorial in one sitting. I know I wouldn't. So you shouldn't if you don't want. If you want, by all means, watch the entire tutorial. Whatever, is your decision. If you do not, you can take breaks. I know I'm taking a long while for this, but I need to emphasize this. Patience is key when modding or coding in general. Taking breaks is also key. If you don't want to, that's fine, as long as you don't watch 7 tutorials in a row of like 9 hours of worth of tutorials in a row. You shouldn't do that. You're gonna get overwhelmed, and you do not want to get overwhelmed and worn out. You need to take breaks whenever you want, and most definitely whenever you need to. Don't be afraid, it's not illegal to take breaks, it's not illegal to ask for help, it's not illegal to rewatch. Just be as comfortable as you can, and yeah. Modding takes time, takes patience, and takes dedication. So hopefully we'll learn how to develop the skills throughout the series, hopefully. That's one of my main goals. More than a modding series, it's more like an introduction, not an introduction, like how to get better at coding in general, not just Isaac modding. That's my goal. Anyway, now for real, that's it. I will probably not mention this as much throughout other episodes. I will still like say take a break if you need to, whatever, because yeah. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I already explained what I needed, I already explained what I went through, so that's it. I will not go through every callback does. It's pretty straightforward, and if it's not, the documentation is here. So if you need help, you can read through the documentation, you can watch again, or you can ask for help in the Isaac Discord. Up to you. But that's everything for this time. I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned. I know this is a different type of content for my channel, but I'm happy doing it. I don't expect you. I hope you enjoy watching and you learn something. That's it for me for today. I don't know when I will do the next tutorial, but we'll see, probably soon. See you next time, and thanks for watching and sitting through this long ass tutorial, almost 80 minutes long. Yes. See you next time.